Chapter 14, Mishnah 1. The previous chapter taught in Mishnah 7 that the marriage of a deaf mute is valid only rabbinically because a deaf mute lacks the intelligence to enter into a transaction that requires intent. The Mishnah there discusses how this affects the laws of Yibum. This chapter continues to discuss the laws of such a marriage, as well as additional cases of Yibum in which a deaf mute is involved. If a deaf mute man married a normal woman, or a normal man married a deaf mute woman, if the husband wishes, he may divorce her. And if he wishes, he may keep her. Since their marriage is valid on the rabbinic level, he can remain married to her. But he may also choose to divorce her even though he is a deaf mute, and his divorce is not valid on the biblical level. This is because just as he can marry by gesturing his intention, so too can he divorce by gesturing his intention, even though he lacks intelligence. The same way the rabbis considered his marriage to be valid despite his lack of full intelligence, they also consider his divorce to be valid to end that marriage. The Mishnah discusses a divorce involving a deaf mute in a case where the marriage was biblically valid. In connection with this, it also discusses the law of divorce in the case of an insane husband or wife whose marriage was biblically valid. Like any deaf mute, an insane person could not enter into transactions that require intent. If a normal man married a normal woman and afterward the wife became a deaf mute, the law is that even though their marriage was biblically valid, if the husband wishes, he may divorce her. Although she is now a deaf mute whose actions are normally not valid on the biblical level, she may nevertheless be divorced because a divorce does not need her intent. And if he wishes, he may certainly keep her as his wife. But if the wife became insane after they got married, he may not divorce her, because the rabbis feared that this might lead people to treating her immorally, since she does not have the awareness to protect herself. If the husband became a deaf mute or insane after they got married, he can never divorce her, because the husband must have intent in order for a divorce to take effect on the biblical level. And the intent of a deaf mute or insane person is not legally recognized on the biblical level. The next Tana challenges this ruling. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, why is it that a woman who became a deaf mute can be divorced, but a man who became a deaf mute cannot give a divorce? A woman can only be divorced if she is able to understand what it means to be divorced. Thus, if a deaf mute woman can be divorced, it must be that a deaf mute is considered to have enough intelligence for matters of divorce. If so, a deaf mute man should also be able to divorce. The sages responded. The sages said to him in reply, a man who divorces cannot be compared to a woman who is being divorced, because a woman can be divorced with her consent or without her consent, but a man can divorce only with his consent. Thus, a deaf mute's wife's divorce can be valid because her agreement is not needed. She just needs to understand what a divorce is, and even a deaf mute can understand this. However, a deaf mute husband cannot divorce because he must legally intend to divorce, and this a deaf mute cannot do.